Good afternoon. It's noon Pacific here on the West Coast, 3 p.m. Eastern on a Monday, which means it's time for Content Chat. And today we're
Woo!
in for a treat because we have my friend and content strategist extraordinaire, Amy Higgins, as my special guest, where we're going to basically sit down and have a chat like we do all the time about content operations. It's one of those things that you think isn't that interesting or sexy until you have a really good conversation about it, when you recognize that it is all of those things. And it's also the difference between having a really effective, kick ass content team that continues to expand its reach, its budget, and its results, and having content being considered a nice project that they did in the past and never want to talk about again. With that, Amy, please take a minute to tell folks who you are and what you do.
Hi, guys. Amy Higgins. If you haven't met me, I live and breathe content strategy. I love operations because I'm a very type A personality. And so I love thinking about how the sausage is made and then reporting on those metrics. I'm currently the director of content strategy at Cloudflare. So I have a team of, I had to count, 8 underneath me that we work across all of our content from the website, customer case studies, events, all of demand generation content, as well as all of our video content. So
Excellent.
small team for large task.
I think that probably every content manager, leader watching this can relate to that. There are never enough resources for the scope of our work. I think that is a constant, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say another constant is, I think, yes, I've had one job where there were documented content. There was a documented content strategy. There were some documented workflows, and just overall operations was something that was documented. That was a long time ago, and it was a very large company. And since then, what I have seen is in too many organizations, you're basically having random acts of content because nothing is documented. People go rogue and they publish whatever they want to the website. They send out emails that are random. All this stuff happens because there aren't frameworks in place to tell people what good looks like, or how you're doing things differently. So there's a lot of baggage that kind of gets brought in and that turns up. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about, what do you need to have a minimum viable, content operations working group? Like, what needs to be in place that you frequently find is not in place?
Oh, where to start? Content strategy, definitely. But even if you don't have content strategy, and say your content team is a studio team, that requests are coming in and they're kind of an agency, an in-house agency, you need to have SLAs and processes documented, because a lot of time people have no idea how long things take. I mean, think
Yep.
about if you are redoing your bathroom. If you had no idea that that would take 3 to 6 months, you wouldn't start it during the winter when you really want to take hot baths. So having that SLA that's agreed upon, understood, everybody knows where their placement is inside the process and why it takes so long is paramount. I would start there first.
I agree with that. And it's honestly, to me, kind of the easiest thing to do because, figuring out what's the workflow, what does it take from an idea all the way through something being published and distributed? Like, what are all those steps and who's responsible for them? You need to understand that in order to be able to prioritize work, in order to be able to make the case that you have, your overloaded workflows, or somebody doesn't have enough to do. Like, that is just kind of a baseline level of understanding you've got to have. And if you can't say how long it takes to create any given piece of content, or worse yet, you're like, oh yeah, whatever it is that we need to do, we can just do it in a few days. That tells me those are people who have absolutely no idea what the process looks like. They do not look inside the sausage factory.
Or the quality of that sausage.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I can crank out a blog post in 30 minutes. Will it be eloquently written and, advanced researched? No way, no how.
No, it's gonna be a rant. It's gonna be reactionary. It's gonna be like, "Something happened, here's your hot take." That
Yeah.
you can crank out.
Yeah. Go
But
for
how but
typos.
you still can't get it in the hands of everybody in your email subscription list within half an hour
Mhm.
because you've gotta get it published, and then you have to get the template. There's, like, so much that goes into, creating and distributing content that I think, frequently people don't know, and partially it's because there isn't that transparency around the operations.
And then you have AI that says, "Oh, this is so much easier to do." That's a whole
And
other rant. We'll get on that later.
yes, we'll get to that. But like me, you have worked both in-house and as a consultant with so many different kinds of teams. And of course, you were even at Top Rank, which was an agency. So you have seen so many different approaches to content operations. So with all of that, with the good and the bad and the ugly in mind, talk to me about some of the like commonalities you've seen amongst highly dysfunctional content operations programs.
Well, I think we already talked about a little bit about them. It's usually, if they're dysfunctional, the quality's off-putting. If they're dysfunctional, there's zero visibility about the team's scope and about the team's actually emotional bandwidth. So if you're highly dysfunctional, your team is times 10 of that dysfunction and suffering from it both from a work output standpoint and probably from a mental standpoint. It's a lot of pressure and just a lot of stress to do that. Um, some other dysfunctionalities that come in is usually the big shiny object. So if people have grand ideas, but they don't actually know how to implement the ideas, and then it's upon usually the content team to implement them.
With no additional budget or technology.
Yeah. Any sort of resources, people, money, technology. Um, it's just hard to, go to a CMO or go to a CEO and say, or a client and say, hey, I can't do this right now because of X, Y, and Z. Because you don't know what X, Y, and Z is because you haven't done the process.
Yep. What are some of the kind of the biggest like operational roadblocks that you find most common? Is it usually within the review process or with the approvals? Like, where do you find most operations kind of get held up?
Well, people, I would say it's RACI. So establishing a RACI, which is responsible, accountable, contributed or consulted, depending on who you talk to, and informed. There's another one I think that's rapid, but RACI is just easy. It's four acronyms to remember. So if you don't have that outlined, who is the final stakeholder? Who is the final approval? So who's the final decision maker? If
If
everybody
two
else,
people's comments disagree, whose comment outweighs the other person's comment?
exactly. And then who's informed? A lot of times people are like, yeah, we'll inform them when it's published. And that's when a hiccup happens because right before you publish it, someone on the informed wants to become a consulted, then impacts someone who's responsible, and then the entire project gets delayed.
And
So
that's
that's the problem with
yeah,
people.
and that's
Establish
how
roles.
deadlines slip, 100%.
Mhm. Yeah. Establish the roles and responsibilities at the beginning kickoff. Um, the other problem is a project manager. I think project managers are highly underrated
Yep.
and they don't get the kudos they deserve. Our content could not operate without Christina on my team. She sets the goals, chases the cats, gets us all organized. She can help me report at the end of how things are doing. Without a project manager or even a project management system, it's impossible to do things. So I'll give you kind of a glimpse 6 months ago, 9 months ago now. I came in to Cloudflare, and the way that my team was operating is content was requested one-on-one via email or in a meeting or in a chat. There was no documented process.
No context.
Yeah. And when we finally sat down and put that into, unfortunately, Jira, we're
So
moving to a
sorry.
different system. We were 400, I think 90% or 60% over capacity. Can you imagine the stress that my team had?
Yeah. But if you don't have a central repository that shows you've already gotten 100 requests for this month that are all urgent, you can't push back and say, hey, this is a great idea and we're not going to get to it until next quarter.
Yeah. Or you can't take the 10 items that are urgent and get all the stakeholders in one room and say, okay, which one is priority here? Because I've
Yeah.
got 10 priorities, which means I have 0 priorities.
And inevitably, you have different people asking for very similar projects to multiple people on your team. So then you end up having folks working parallel on something that one person could actually be working on in its entirety.
Yeah, our team, I would say about a third of the work that was created was duplicative.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That is so stressful. So, as a new person coming in, what do you do when you see that? How do you get the buy-in for putting a, project management tool in place, for putting an intake process in place? You and I, of course, we love those things because we're huge nerds, but people who are especially used to being able to just in a meeting casually ask for a white paper are sometimes going to be a little bit reluctant to embrace having an actual process.
Change is hard. Like, let's just call it what it is. So a lot of it is just change management. I hate to say it, but dictating the process. This is how we do it. This is how it gets done. I mean, even my boss is like, hey, can you do this? I'm like, sure. Can you create a Jira ticket? And he's like, sure. And I'm like, I just need it documented. I need to hold everybody accountable, myself included.
Yeah.
So that comes into play. And then the other part is showcasing the wins. So as we got our process in place and as we started getting things in our ticket system, we were able to showcase capacity, an increase. We were able to show an increase in on-time delivery. We were able to show a decrease in things that were being replicated across teams. And we were able to show an increase in centralization. So we're a global company. Because we have everything documented, I can go to our APAC team well in advance of things being launched and saying, this is what we're working on. Do you have any interest in this? And then we can loop them into the process. But we can only do that now because we have a process management system and we have a content strategy that's documented.
Right. And that's so helpful because, having been in that role before as the headquarters content lead, and then having folks, you do something and then immediately EMEA and APAC say, oh, we want that too. And we need it by next week for this trade show we're going to. That is always just so frustrating, to have those kinds of things happen, which is why it is so important to have a way to loop those folks in, to have that transparency so everyone is aware of what's happening at the global level.
Yeah. And if you didn't want to have it centralized, there's also a way you can share the workload.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked at one company that when I was a content manager, that I'd be working on one section of the overall user journey. And then my EMEA partner was working on a different section where the APAC partner was working on a completely different. And so we were able to produce at scale and then hand everything over to each other. So, one person might be doing the customer proof points and the customer case studies. One person might be updating the website and doing more of the product content. And one person's doing the evergreen top of the funnel or executive content. And then we would just throw it over the pond essentially and share each other's content.
See, and that sounds like a dream, but the thing is you can't do that if you don't have any of those kind of, documented things in place. Like if you don't have your documented brand voice, you don't have an agreement on what do our case studies look like? What do they include? What's the difference between the print version of a case study and the website version of the case study? If you don't have those kinds of frameworks identified and agreed upon, then there's no way you can have the ability to scale and to move more quickly.
Mm-hmm. We are going way back to basics right now. We have a very well documented voice and brand guide. We have documented templates for our ebooks versus white papers.
Which I love, because guess what? Spoiler alert, they are not the same thing, people.
We had to do, and we need to do version 2, but we had to do a definition sheet of what a white paper is, what an ebook is, what a case story is versus a case study. We have executive guides, what the difference is between an executive guide and a buyer's guide. Now we're going one stage deeper and actually developing templates for those. So an ebook for an executive guide, here's how many pages, here's what's on each page, here's the percentage of graphics, here are the type of graphics, here's what the CTA should be, here's what the linking strategy should be, and it's templatized. Then buyer's guide, here's how the buyer's guide is different. Here are the things that you need to have. Here are the things that don't need to be in here. Because if not, people would start making these ebooks that are 50 pages long. I don't need
Well,
to
well,
document.
20 years ago, that was a really great tactic that Marketo, in particular, deployed. And so then people got the idea that, oh, we want to do these super long ebooks. No, we don't. Not anymore. There are plenty of other ways that you can do these things.
Yep, the essential guides. I remember those. I've written quite a few of those.
Haven't we all? But things change over time. And so I love that you're going through this process of defining those templates so that way it's clear what makes those different kinds of content their own entity. And excuse Kupo. Kupo is apparently on guard dog duty, and he's guarding us against a cat right now, I'm pretty sure. So I love that you're creating those templates that have those definitions in place, because that's also how you can then incorporate AI as an intern or a personal trainer to look at, here's the standards that we have put in place. Now, can you objectively say, did we include all the things? Is there something in here that shouldn't be in here? And then you have the ability to use AI for what it's good for, as opposed to trying to get it to create that content from scratch.
Mm-hmm. And it also allows us to look at which one works better. If everything is created on the same template and we want to say which talk track is resonating with our audience more, it gives you that one down to the scientific method. The one thing that's different is the context. The design is close to the same. The templatized is close to the same. The promotion is close to the same. So you can really look at this type of content is resonating more with our audience, not this delivery of content is better for our audience.
And I think that's always really difficult to be able to say, with any kind of certainty, whether it's the topic, the author, or the format. So having some of those things being consistent for sure can help you understand what content formats you should be doing more of, and sharing at which stage of the buyer's journey. So super important. And it looks like we have I want to share a few of the comments we've gotten so far. So Alec is giving you kudos for creating that definition sheet, because that is so important to have. I love that. At Schwab, we had the Schwab acronym manager, Sam, which again was a definition sheet, but I do wish that we'd had that kind of thing at a more micro level for some of the different groups, because definitely people had different ideas about what all the different types of publications were.
Wait, was Sam an acronym or was Sam a person?
Sam was an acronym.
I love that.
Yeah, Schwabies are kind of geeky. Before we move ahead, Barb asks if there are any, absolute critical sections that you recommend for a solid content strategy.
Yes, I would definitely align your content strategy with full funnel. So where are people coming in, learning about you? Where are they staying engaged, coming to you for help? Where are they deciding that it's you versus somebody else? And after they onboard, how do you create them into an advocate? So aligning your content with that framework and making sure that it's full funnel and there's no gaps is often well overlooked. People either have it really heavy in one section and lighter in the other.
That comes back to their objectives, because frequently when people have are defining their content strategy, they don't have solid business objectives for what's the job of the content program. Why are we using content? And if you don't have that solid objective in the first place, you're not going to be aligned in any of those other areas either.
Exactly. And I'd also put on all of those areas, you need to have the objective and the messaging per each area. If someone comes in and they're an executive and they're top of the funnel, their messaging is going to be different than an end user top of the funnel. And the objective of what they're reading or why they're reading it or why they're listening to it or why they're watching it is also going to be different.
And what you're asking them to do, because are you really going to ask an end user to book a demo? Because, I mean, you can, but is that the best use of your call to action on that page or on that document?
Yeah, very, very true.
So what do you feel like has been like the hardest part from an operations standpoint to get teams to the point where they're able to actually scale, whether it's by adding additional in-house staff, freelancers, or agencies? Like, what has been the hardest part of getting teams ready to be able to scale from an operations standpoint?
You need an advocate. If you're a team member, you need somebody who can advocate for what you do and why you do it. And then you need to have that documented process. So, for example, and I'm going to pull up some figures that have not been shared yet by my boss, to my boss. We are looking at our Q1 data right now for our process. We have over 50% of our workload in Q1 was based upon ad hoc tickets, meaning random acts of content that are random for my team, maybe not random from the requesters, but the lack of planning impacts the efficiency.
Of course.
So that's one of the biggest things is you need to get everybody on a planning schedule. And if there's things that you can't plan, like you have a huge event coming up, things always happen at events. So give yourself like 20% buffer for the things that are going to come up because they inevitably always come up. The other thing that's people need in order to scale is really showcasing the value of that. So if right now, one of my next tasks, because I know over 50% of our projects in Q1 were ad hoc. The other thing is about 39% of our tickets are a task 8 weeks overdue from feedback. We're waiting for feedback from other teams. 8 weeks. So then it's like, why is the feedback delayed? What's going on? Let us get to that. But if you're doing your math correctly on the phone, if feedback was on time and we continue to still have the same number of ad hocs, my team is not proportionally researched or resourced for all of that work.
Right.
You just don't have enough people or enough time.
Because you can't have an avalanche of all of that content you're waiting for feedback on. It's going to come in inevitably all at once, and then it's going to be on fire because, oh, well, we asked for this months ago. It's like, but you sat on it for 2 months, so it wasn't that urgent. Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on too. I find too, when you have that many ad hoc requests, what's terrible is frequently they wouldn't have needed to come in as an ad hoc request if they'd, been part of like quarterly planning, because you could have had the same person who is creating an ebook for something also then create the email, create the derivative blog posts, and to do it as one package, versus when the requests come in later to create something from it, that person might not even be available. So then somebody else who wasn't the one that did all the research might be the one having to create it. So you lose the efficiencies and ability to scale from a production standpoint too.
Mm-hmm. That's something that's coming out of the weeds for us, is when you look at the process, where do you add in the certain teams? So like how I spoke about before, now that we have the documented content strategy, going to our regional partners and saying, here's what we're working on. What is of interest to you? What are we missing? That's for your market. But there's also, if they raise their hand and say, hey, I'm interested in this, when we get to proofreading stage, then we send it off to localization for it to start to get localized. So by the time that it's through creative stage, and this is for a downloadable asset, by the time that it's through creation stage, then it's just a kind of a copy and paste, not 100% copy and paste, but it's taking all the localized languages and putting them into the correct creative. Where before the creative would happen, it would launch, and then someone's like, hey, over here, can we have that too? And then you start the whole process over again.
But we want it slightly different. We want our ebook to be more of a white paper. You're like, that's a completely different thing, actually. Thanks. So I feel like what I'm hearing from you as far as like the things that really need to be in place in order to scale, first, you have to have that agreed upon documented content strategy. But that's your gateway to process and governance, because you can't just have that strategy, because it's important to have it documented, but in order to actually scale from it, you have to also have that well-defined brand voice and messaging. You need to have the style guide elements so people understand, what the approach is that you take, and then, building out those templates, or at the very minimum, the brief of what goes into those different types of content that you have, and then the workflows around what is the soup to nuts process for going from the request all the way through the delivery of the type of content. Is there anything I'm missing that you feel like is also just like really critical for being able to scale your content operations?
I'll bring up RACI again, but it's really understanding that do not pass go. So one of the examples at Salesforce, and we're starting to implement it here at Cloudflare, is once an outline is done, there's a final approver. It doesn't get put from outline to draft until the final approver agrees. That person is do not pass go. And so thinking about where your do not pass goes. So like before you put it on social, having a proofreader do it. That's a do not pass go. How many of us have in old days tweeted something completely incorrectly said, and then you're like, oops, sorry.
Or a typo, so you tagged the wrong account.
Oh, I did that once.
It's the worst. I think that's really important. I like that the outline example, because there's nothing worse than working on a piece of long form content and having what you thought was an approved outline, and so you've drafted, and then somebody comes back and wants to blow up your draft because they have something completely huge and different that they feel like should have been part of it. You're like, where does this fit in? I can't just tack this on. Or, like people don't necessarily understand how they could really be disrupting a draft and the entire creative process by asking for something completely different at the draft stage.
That would be the cat falling off the table. Sorry for that noise. The other part I'd put in there is the brief. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing a video, a social media campaign, a downloadable asset, even a web page, like having the brief clearly defined. What is the purpose for this? What are we expecting people to do? Why would people engage with this? And what are our motives afterwards? Like, what do we want them to do afterwards? And if people can't answer that, then they don't need the content. That's usually the pushback I get from people, is that brief is too much. I'm like, why are they here? What do they need? How are we going to help them?
Yeah. If you can't tell me the objective, what your why is behind creating it, it means that that you don't have one. You're just asking me to do a thing because you want some stuff. So that way you can show that you've been busy. And that's not the content team's job.
Yeah. It's the bomb. I hate the bomb. I wish I could blow up the bomb. What is the bill? Everything has to have the same bill of materials. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think people can get really caught up in, well, our campaigns always have these 4 elements. It's like, are all of your campaigns talking to the exact same person at the same stage of consideration, in the same industry, at the same, doing the same job? No, of course not. So why on earth would everything have the same bill of materials? That's pretty silly.
Mhm.
So I agree with you on that. Let me think. Oh, the other question is, from a project management tool standpoint, talk to me about kind of like the different like layers of what that can look like, because there's the minimum viable spreadsheet, which is better than no project management. But what for you have been kind of the different levels of really solid project management that you found has allowed operations to actually blossom?
I'll tell you when we get there. I would say my favorite project management is when everybody is on the same project management process and tool. So if you are in, say, Asana or Airtable, and the creative team, the website team, the content team are all in there, but your entire subject matter experts, which usually are the project marketing managers, are not in there, then you're having to, you know, chase them down to get them to respond to stuff. Um,
And you
if
frequently hear, oh, well, we can't afford to add more seats in the tool to invite them. It's like, well, but then we don't have a workflow.
Yeah, feedback and reviews need to be in the same process, same point. So I had one agency that didn't have Google Docs. We operate primarily in Google Docs. So they would write a draft, put it in Word, send it over in an email. We put it in a Google Doc, and then somebody mistakenly forgets to check their email that says, hey, we put this in the Google Doc, and all they see is the Word doc. So they open up a separate Google Doc,
Oh, no.
scale that, and then you have 10 different Google Docs, all with different feedback. And somebody has, usually me, when I worked in an agency, would have to go in and put all that feedback in one place.
And that's such
So,
a terrible use of time and of collaborative software.
yeah. So collaboration needs to happen at the same point in the same place with who's going to do what, when, where, and how. Also, in a perfect world, when things get moved, when one date gets moved out, it's painful to go in there into a spreadsheet and systematically move all the dates out unless you're super spreadsheet whiz and can set up a formula to do that. Most of us are not there. And so having that, how do things move? So if one gets delayed, all the next 10 steps are also delayed.
Yeah. Just one of the benefits of using, purpose-driven project management software, where you can actually define what the working days are, so that way it can automagically, as I like to say, reflow it when you have that happen, because it is horrible to have to go through and manually update in a calendar, in a spreadsheet, when you can't do that, because you don't want to be assigning things to people to have that be due on holidays or when they're on vacation, because I can't even tell you how frequently you'll see stuff like that happen. And it's because people aren't using a tool that allows the people to actually note when they're out of office, or when the office is closed.
Mhm.
And so that's how you end up with situations where you'll have an executive feel like, oh yeah, we're going to have this done by XYZ date. And oh, it's no big deal that, I'm pushing out this little part of it, because they can't see all of the dependencies. They don't know that there's somebody who's holding off taking their vacation until something is launching, or that something was scheduled in a specific way due to availability. So I totally agree that having everyone on that same tool, even if that tool is one that somebody dislikes, is really important. Although Jira always gives me pause for marketing teams, because it is a really good tool for situations like IT management, where users are submitting a problem that needs to be resolved, because it's a pretty linear one-to-one kind of interaction, versus content marketing, which is anything but that. It involves so many more people and so many elements. that's got to be tough. So I'm excited for you that you're going to be moving on to a different tool and hopefully getting enough seats that everyone can be using it.
Yeah, my boss actually sends me memes now because he knows how much I hate Jira. Also, in setting up that tool and setting up your processes, not one task or one person is created equally. So if you have, say you have final stakeholder, and say the stakeholder is your CIO, well, they're busy. They're going to take at least 2 weeks. It might only take them 5 minutes to review it, but it takes 2 weeks to get on their schedule to find that 5 minutes. So you have to build into the system CIO review, 2 weeks. Now let's
understand, do you actually need to get 15 minutes on their calendar where you're sitting there while they're reviewing and asking you questions? Because in a lot of situations, you absolutely need to be doing that, because otherwise they're going to give you feedback, or they're going to have a question and they're going to bounce something back to you, and then you're not going to be able to get their feedback in response for another 2 weeks. So that can derail your whole timeline.
Exactly.
Well, of course, once you have all of the technology in place, all of the documentation, all of that totally critical foundational stuff taken care of, which is a huge lift, then it comes to getting the right people in the right roles in order to bring your whole operation strategy to life. So talk to me about your dream. Like, what does your dream content team look like from an operations standpoint?
Ooh. I don't know. I think I'm pretty close to it right now. My team is awesome. They're all capable of doing a wide variety of things. I spent a lot of time getting to know them when I first came on board, trying to understand how they operate, what they prefer, what is their favorite thing to do, and really tailoring how the team is structured to their preferences. So the way that the team is structured is we created pods, cross-functional pods, that are aligned with our market priorities or themes. So I have one person who's strictly on one theme. I have another person who's on another theme. Then I have somebody who really doesn't want to be in the pods, but is really great with website copy and really great with more in-depth learning copy. So that's all they do. They're very happy there. They enjoy it. And then if they have questions that's around a certain theme, they have a content person to work with. We just had our post-mortem Q1 analysis with the team actually just a couple hours ago. And I asked all of them, like, what went bad? What went well? What should we improve? And everybody said the cross-functional collaboration across teams is great and has improved enormously, but also the interdependencies within our own content team is also great. They're a really, really strong team that can work off each other and support each other while also working on their own individual task.
Well, it sounds like your pods probably have really helped people who used to have to spend a lot of time chasing down subject matter experts to get things done. It sounds like it must have really helped people be able to dig in to what they're doing and just make their lives a little bit easier to build those relationships.
Yeah, because ultimately your content writers should also be your subject matter experts.
And how do they get to be those subject matter experts if they never have any, contact with customer experience or product?
Yeah.
So actually, before we go to Barb's question, typically when you've been in pods, because I know this is not your first pod rodeo, what's the good kind of makeup? Like, who are the people that you would look for to try to build that kind of a collaborative structure with? What kind of other roles?
Well, it's definitely collaborative. So thinking about from B2B marketing, it's usually your product marketing manager, someone on the demand gen or campaign side. If you have a big enough team, someone's on the social and organic side, someone on the customer side, so customer advocacy, customer marketing can bring in those voices, and then someone on the content side. I've also seen when you have a larger creative team, someone on the creative team. So it's really, if you think about going to market, it's a little tiny go-to-market team just for that theme or that market priority. But then once you have multiple pods, you still need someone to sit over all of them as the umbrella to see where the duplication of efforts are. So if you have one thing that could cross both audiences, across both themes, then you might be able to use that asset or the end video, but maybe change the paid strategy around or change the emails around. So that's always helpful to know.
And that's a good teeing up of Barb's question about, when you're talking about themes in your current organization, what would an example be of a theme?
So Cloudflare has 3 main themes. We have security, applications, and networking. Lo and behold, that also aligns with our products. Salesforce, when I worked on Service Cloud, we had 4 themes. So we had high volume contact centers. We had digital contact centers, so a little bit smaller in-house contact centers. Then we had field service, which is a completely different audience. I forget the last one. I'll remember it one of these days. It's been years. Twilio, our themes were aligned around our audiences. So we had the marketing audience. We had the developer audience. So you can do it by market priorities. You can do it by talk tracks. You can do it by products. You can do it by audience.
Yeah. So that is always an important question to ask, is when somebody is talking about themes, exactly what do they mean? Because there isn't just a one answer for that. It can be, some marketing teams even have quarterly themes, especially if they're in some sort of highly regulated industry that has things that happen on a, regular mandated schedule, such as if you're working in financial services, well, there's going to be the time frame where everybody is doing open enrollment. Well, then you're going to have some sort of a theme that relates to that, because you want to make sure that you're getting the right information out there for new investors, new employees, all that kind of stuff. So that's a great question, Barb. Thank you for keeping us honest, so that way we address that, because that can be a little interesting. I think a lot of times people think of themes just as what are we going to talk about in the blog? And while that can be a theme, when you're talking about operations, it's usually going to be bigger and more overarching than that.
Yeah, it's your big umbrellas. I've heard people call themes initiatives. I heard them call campaigns, programs. That's also right, getting the terminology that I spoke about at the beginning down. What's the difference between a campaign versus a program versus initiative versus a theme?
Yep. Because every organization is different. We do not have to, it's not like getting your driver's license, says somebody who doesn't have a driver's license. But I understand conceptually getting a driver's license. So when you've managed tons of teams at this point, as have I, I'd love to hear, though, some of your tips for how you keep teams motivated and inspired over the long term. Because I don't know about you, but I'm a writer person because I'm incredibly curious. I want to be learning new things all the time. So I personally think that we content people can be kind of hard to manage, because we want new things all the time.
Not everyone wants new things all the time. I think it's knowing your people. And this would be, doesn't matter if you're managing content people, doesn't matter. Like in a former life, I managed a motorcycle store. So knowing my people. Do they work better in the mornings versus the evenings? Do they need, for writers especially, do you need blocks of time off? So I had one team who, one of my members was a morning person and one was an evening person. And so instead of having our meetings always in the morning, we had to divide and conquer, where it's like, okay, Monday is meeting day, Tuesday and Wednesday is work day. Where Tuesday, no meeting block in the morning. So my morning person had that time. Wednesday in the evening, no meeting block in the evening, so my evening person has that time. So it's really kind of understanding how people work. I actually have a blog. I'll put it in the LinkedIn chat later. But one of the things I always do with the team is an editorial contract or like a team agreement. So we have, when do you like to work? How do you like to receive feedback? To your example, is it better in person? Do you like to get feedback in the doc and have time to let it soak in and then jump on a call? How do you like to receive praise? Are you a person that likes in a big meeting where everybody says, "Hey, Erica, great job"? Or does that get you embarrassed and you'd rather me just chat you and go, "Thank you so much. That was wonderful."
See, also, some people don't want to have happy birthday sung to them in a restaurant.
Yeah.
So I think those are all really great tips. I'm wondering too, how do you, what are your strategies for helping your team members get the ongoing education that they need? Because if there is one constant to content marketing, it's that it is evolving and changing literally every day. So, how do you support your team to make sure that they're able to keep up?
A lot of it is giving them visibility to all the tools. So if it's, "Hey, I saw this webinar come up that this company's doing that's exactly on the topic you love," sign up for it. There's a lot of free resources out there, and it's hard, especially early on in your career, to understand where all the resources are. So someone later in their career or your manager can help you figure out where those resources are. The other thing that really helps is look for a company that provides extended education. So at Cloudflare, we have a budget that we can use that. Last year, I used it to go to a conference. One of my teammates used it to go to a conference in our hometown, so it was less budget. So thinking around lines like that, where can you learn online? Where can you learn in person? And also, where are the communities? Complete shameless plug, but I'm really tired of online communities and miss in person. So a couple of friends and I are going to start a San Francisco meetup, probably once a quarter, where you can get together and like really talk out things and have some panels. And that helps. Yeah.
Love it. Because basically, I did that with my all of my content folks in San Francisco when I lived there too. It was awesome.
Yeah. I did it. Evan Hamilton, who I think now I forget where he is. Last time I checked, he was at Reddit. He had a community manager breakfast. 15, 20, oh God, yeah. I'm not going to date it. Over a decade ago, we used to meet once a week every morning. We sit around in a round top. We had bagels and coffee and just talked about, as a community manager, what were your struggles? I mean, that helps have people who are your peers.
100%. But that said, for folks who do feel more amenable to it, there are so many interesting online communities. And when we publish the recap for this, I'll list a bunch of the ones that I love. And Amy, if there's any that you're a part of that I'm not already a part of that I should include, you'll have to let me know. Because I think
Content Marketing Institute, which also has a great mentorship program. Finding a mentor is good. Yeah.
Now, we've got about 10 minutes left, so let's spend that time talking about technology. I think between the two of us, we've probably used every project management tool, and we love and hate some more than others.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to talk about the two that I think we hate the most. But what are some of the tools and technologies that are really amazing, and that if you have the opportunity and you have the budget, that you should be looking at in order to really supercharge your content operations?
So if you're just looking at operations, Asana and Airtable are my two favorites. If you're looking at more of a content management system, so not like the CMS, like AEM or WordPress, that's a whole nother avenue to look into as well. And I would say I don't really have a favorite there yet. They've changed so much in the past 2 years that I haven't looked at any of them, but that would be the other thing to look at. The problem with CMS tools is it works really well for content teams and agencies. It doesn't work so well for cross-functional.
Yeah, I want to say that Kapost was probably the one, and this was before it was acquired, so I've not used it post acquisition, so I can't speak to that. But at least before then, it was really easy for the non-content people to understand that they had something to review and to review it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they made it really easy, and that's the thing is it's got to be able to plug into their workflows, meaning it's got to send an email to somebody with somewhere they can click and access the thing and leave comments. They are not going to sit through a training in order to use your tool. They're not going to want to, jump through a bunch of hoops. So having something that's dead simple for those subject matter experts and approvers is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
I would add from an operations standpoint, I want everybody to be using Grammarly. I kind of get low-key aggravated if somebody has sent me something and they clearly haven't run it through Grammarly. Not that I take every Grammarly suggestion, but I take all of the typo suggestions. I fix things that are wrong. And at this point, they have, I have a paid version and I have for years, but they have a free version too. So they're really, just at a baseline level, we shouldn't be making some of the silly mistakes that we make. So I feel like Grammarly is kind of like is the minimum thing that you need to have because there's no excuse at this point for not having it.
Yeah, I would say SEO, an SEO tool, some sort of SEO tool that can analyze your content.
Mm-hmm.
We have SEMrush. I've used SEMrush at other companies before. I like them because they have a content review platform that will then say this sentence is oddly structured. And then it becomes more of like a gamification of trying to get it ranked to the right SEO, tone and voice, simple to read. That helps a lot ease disagreements when you can put it through a tool and say,
Yep.
hey, we need to get this at a ranking of 8 out of a 10. And your feedback suggestions gave us to a 6 out of 10.
So maybe we can do a different post that addresses some of those things you brought up that are not what the average person searching is actually looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Exactly. And I have to share this from Andy because Andy is on Team Grammarly. And, she's been teaching content marketing. And I am with her. If I was teaching a class, I would be like, there is no excuse for bad grammar when Grammarly is free. You can disagree. I use commas. I use stereo commas. And Grammarly does not agree with that always. I don't care. I'm using them.
Mm-hmm.
And I still use an M dash as a human being. I'm not an AI. I'm a human being, and I use an M dash. And I'm not changing them into other things just so that people who are ill-informed and posting the exact same post on LinkedIn, all of them, think that it's, M dash means you're using AI. I roll.
This is why we get along.
Yes, Amy does have an Oxford comma t-shirt. That's pretty great. Look
It's
for her wearing it.
this time.
It's been worn at many a conference.
Yeah, and
it's a
a
great way to make
calls.
friends. Great way to make new friends.
The right friends.
Now, Amy, we only have a few minutes left, so give me some of your best tips for folks if they come in and they're taking on a new content team. How can they get the lay of the land and do some quick tune-ups for their content operations? What are some easy, quick wins?
Get to know your team first and foremost, because no teams are alike. Don't think that your processes that worked at your previous company are going to work at your current company. So have a good baseline to start with, and then change that baseline as you get to know the teams and get to know the SLA structure. Otherwise, the very quick wins is that definition. Get all your weird definitions down. Is it this an ebook? Is it a white paper? Is it a brief? Is it a product overview? Like, what's the difference? And then set up the SLAs and set up the RACIs.
I would add, the only thing I'd add to what you've said here is in that documentation, in your like cheat sheet of all your definitions, I would do an appendix to that, which is work on your taxonomy. Because I have to tell you, I have never gone into an organization where I haven't found a huge gap there because of there being no consistent use of terminology. So the reason that's important, of course, is when you do things like try to use data from Google Analytics or any analytics tool, and you try to take that data and make any kind of meaningful recommendations or gain insight, if you have every word has multiple spellings, with a hyphen, without a hyphen, with capitalization, without capitalization, one word, two word, British spelling, US spelling. If you have 7 different ways of saying the same thing, oh, and plus some synonyms. So you have all of your content that's been tagged differently in 7, 8 myriad ways. All of a sudden you go from being able to make smart, informed, data-informed decisions to getting things wrong because you've missed a whole bunch of things because they weren't all tagged the same. So the Google Analytics doesn't even know that it's the same thing. I run into this every time. And the fastest way that you can find out if this is happening is you go into your website CMS and go and find the category and tags and export that document and look at it. And you're going to find all of these places where you have synonyms being used, where you have different spellings, and you've got to fix that. It's one of those tiny little operational things that can completely derail what you're trying to do.
Yeah, just try to do a UTM generator where someone does social and uses a capital S and someone uses a bottom lowercase s.
Well, Amy, this is why you and I do things like create a spreadsheet that is the UTM generator with defined fields that people are pulling down and choosing from to make the UTM, as opposed to letting people freeform ad hoc create them.
Define and locked. No edits.
And yes, we will share a link to a UTM spreadsheet so you can see exactly what we're nerding out about right now.
I created it with Micah back at Zendesk, which was over a decade ago, I think. I have replicated that UTM spreadsheet at multiple places and shared with multiple friends. Yeah.
Well, we will include it in the recap because everybody needs a UTM spreadsheet. So that way you can fix your taxonomy problems. It is step 1 that will help you be thinking through.
Very true. Did we have any final questions in one last minute?
So far, I'm not seeing anything. So let's talk about where can people get more Amy? Where are you? Where can they find your thoughts? Where are you speaking? What's going on with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and all my social handles are Amy W. Higgins. So I will be there. I don't have any speaking gigs lined up coming up because things are busy. Life is busy. But mainly you can find all my things on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being our guest today and sharing your insights from your decade plus of managing content teams. I'm sure that folks will leave this viewing feeling pretty inspired.
I hope so.
So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And everyone else, we will not be back next week because it is a holiday. So we will see you here for Content Chat in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.